At the age of 82, I've seen a lot in my life, learned lessons through the years that shaped who I am. But there's one decision I look back on with a heavy heart, a choice that I wish I could undo. That decision was moving into a nursing home. Back then, it seemed like the sensible thing to do. My family encouraged it, painting a picture of a place where I'd have all the care and comfort I could possibly need. They told me it would be a relief, a way to take the burden off my shoulders, and I trusted them. I thought I was making the right move, but once I settled in, I quickly realized that the reality was far from what I'd been promised. I know many of you might be at a crossroads, maybe thinking about this option for yourself or for someone you love. Perhaps you've been told it's the safest choice, or maybe you believe it'll make life easier in the long run. But before you take that step, I want to share my story, the things I wish I'd known before I packed up my life and moved into a nursing home. Because the truth is, living in a nursing home isn't just about convenience, it changes everything, and once you're in, getting out is much harder than you might think. I'm going to walk you through the lessons I learned, the regrets that still linger, and I hope you'll stay with me until the end. Some of these insights might catch you off guard, and if you know someone who's considering a nursing home, this could be exactly what they need to hear before making a decision that will alter their life forever. When I first moved into the nursing home, I wasn't prepared for the biggest shock of all, the one that hit me harder than anything else. It wasn't the small room they assigned me, with its plain walls and unfamiliar bed. It wasn't the set meal times, where I had to eat whether I was hungry or not. It wasn't even the sea of new faces, people I didn't know and who didn't know me. The hardest part was realizing that I'd lost control over my own life. Before I moved in, I had my routines, the little things that made my days mine. I decided when to wake up in the morning, whether to have a cup of coffee at 7 or 9. I chose what to eat for breakfast, maybe eggs one day, oatmeal the next. If I wanted to take a walk, I'd grab my jacket and step outside, feeling the fresh air on my face. I could cook my own meals, sit in my favorite chair with a book, or just enjoy the quiet of my own space. But once I got to the nursing home, all of that changed. My time was no longer my own. Everything ran on a schedule, one that I didn't get to set. Breakfast was at a specific time, whether I felt like eating or not. Lights out happened at a certain hour, even if I wasn't ready to sleep. If I wanted to take a walk outside, I had to ask permission, and even then, I'd often have to wait until someone was available to go with me. Simple decisions, things I'd never thought twice about, like what to eat or what to wear, started feeling like privileges I had to earn rather than choices I could make freely. I remember my first week there, waking up in a bed that didn't feel like mine. I sat up, stretched, and instinctively reached for the book I'd been reading back at home. But as I looked around the room, it hit me like a wave. This wasn't my home. My books, my favorite chair, the little comforts I'd spent years collecting, they were all gone. In their place were sterile walls, a bed I hadn't chosen, and a sinking feeling I couldn't shake. I was no longer in charge of my own life. The hardest part was realizing that once you give up that independence, getting it back is nearly impossible. You adapt because you have to. You stop arguing when they tell you what's for dinner. Even if you don't like it, you stop asking to go for a walk whenever you feel like it. Because you learn it's not worth the hassle. You start fitting into their system, following their rules, but in the process, you lose a piece of yourself. I began to feel like I was shrinking, like the person I'd been for 82 years was slipping away, replaced by someone who just went along with the routine. If you're thinking about moving into a nursing home, I want you to ask yourself something. Are you ready to give up the small freedoms that make life yours? Because once they're gone, you'll miss them more than you ever thought possible. You'll miss the ability to decide when to have your morning coffee, or to step outside just because the sun is shining. Those little things, they're what make a life, and I didn't realize how much they meant to me until they were taken away. But the loss of independence wasn't the only thing that hit me hard. One of the most painful truths I faced in the nursing home was the feeling of being forgotten. When I first arrived, my family reassured me that they'd visit often. I believed them, and for a little while they kept their word. My daughter would come by once a week, her smile lighting up my room as she told me about her day. My grandchildren visited on weekends, their laughter filling the air as they shared stories about school and friends. For a brief moment, it felt like I was still connected to my old life, like I hadn't been left behind. But as the months went by, things changed. The visits became less frequent. My daughter started calling instead of coming in person, Her voice on the phone a poor substitute for her presence. My grandchildren got busy with their lives. School projects, part-time jobs, and sports taking up their time. I understood, of course. Life moves fast, and they had their own responsibilities. But understanding didn't make it hurt any less. Holidays were the hardest. Everyone promised they'd come, but plans would change at the last minute. I'd find myself sitting in the common room, watching the door, hoping today would be the day someone remembered me. I'd see other residents doing the same, their eyes fixed on the entrance, waiting for a familiar face that might never show up. It wasn't that my family stopped loving me. I know they still cared, but life gets in the way, and when you're not part of their daily routine anymore, it's easy for them to assume you're fine. They think you're adjusting, that you don't need as much attention as you used to. But the truth is, the longer you're in a nursing home, the easier it is for people to forget how much you still need them. I remember one evening, sitting in my room, holding my phone, debating whether to call my son. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to remind him that I was here, waiting for a visit that might never come. So I put the phone down, and in that moment, I realized this was my life, now watching the days go by, hoping someone would remember to include me. If you're considering a nursing home, I want you to think about this. Are you prepared for the loneliness that might come? Because no matter how much your family loves you, once you're out of sight, it's easier than you think to become out of mind. You'll find yourself missing the casual conversations, the shared meals, the simple act of being part of someone's day. And those moments of connection, they're harder to come by when you're living in a place that feels so far removed from the world you once knew. Another regret that weighs on me is the loss of purpose I felt after moving in. When I made the decision to leave my home, I thought I was just changing where I lived. I didn't realize I was also changing why I lived. Back at home, I had responsibilities, small things that gave my days meaning. I'd water the plants in my garden, watching them bloom under my care. I'd make my own coffee in the morning, savoring the ritual of grinding the beans and waiting for the pot to brew. I'd tidy up my space, keeping things just the way I liked them. Those tasks, they gave me a reason to get up each day, a sense of purpose that kept me going. But in the nursing home, all of that disappeared. Meals were made for me, so I didn't need to cook. Cleaning was handled by the staff, so I didn't need to lift a finger. The plants I'd once tended to, they weren't mine anymore. At first I told myself it would be nice to relax, to let go of chores and responsibilities, and just rest. But after a few weeks, I realized something was missing. The days felt endless, stretching out with nothing to do but wait. I'd sit in my room staring at the walls, waiting for meal times, waiting for someone to stop by, waiting for time to pass. I saw the same thing happen to other residents. People who had once been full of energy, now spent their days sitting staring into space, with nothing to occupy their minds or hands. There was a man named George, an 84-year-old, who'd been a carpenter his whole life. Back at home, he was always working on something, fixing a chair, building a birdhouse in his garage. His hands were always busy, always creating, but in the nursing home there were no tools, no projects, nothing for him to build. I watched as he withdrew, his once strong hands now idle in his lap. One day he turned to me and said, "I feel useless," and I knew exactly what he meant. When you no longer have something to care for, something to work toward, life starts to lose its meaning. The mind slows down, the body follows, and soon you start to feel like just another person in a place where time moves. But nothing really changes. If you're thinking about a nursing home, ask yourself this: what gives your life meaning? Because once you move in, finding purpose isn't as simple as filling your time. It's about fighting to hold on to the things that make you feel alive, the things that remind you who you are. I wish I'd known how much I'd missed those daily rituals, the small tasks that kept me connected to the person I'd always been. One of the things I didn't expect was how quickly my health would decline after moving in. Before I made the move, I was doing well for my age. I wasn't running marathons, but I could still take care of myself. I'd go for walks around my neighborhood, feeling the pavement under my feet as I waved to neighbors. I'd cook my own meals, standing in the kitchen as I chopped vegetables or stirred a pot on the stove. I had my little routines that kept me moving, like grocery shopping or stretching in the mornings to keep my joints loose. Even just walking around the house, from room to room, kept my legs strong. But once I moved into the nursing home, everything changed. At first it seemed like I was just taking it easy. Meals were brought to me, so I didn't need to stand in the kitchen anymore. If I needed something, I could press a button, and someone would come help. But what I didn't realize was that the less I did for myself, the weaker I became. I stopped moving as much, and soon my legs felt stiffer than they ever had. I sat more than I used to, and before I knew it, getting up from a chair started feeling like a chore. The muscles I'd spent years maintaining, they began to fade, and it happened faster than I ever thought possible. I saw it happen to others too. People who walked into the nursing home on their own 2 feet were suddenly relying on walkers, then wheelchairs. People who had once been independent now needed help with things they'd never struggled with before. The more help we were given, the more we seemed to need it. I remember my neighbor Alice, an 81-year-old woman who was lively when she first arrived. She used to take daily walks around the facility, insisting she wasn't going to slow down just because of her age. But after a few months, I noticed she wasn't walking as much. Then she started using a walker, and not long after, a wheelchair. One day she looked at me and said, "I don't know when it happened, but I feel like I aged 10 years in just a few months." That's exactly what it felt like. When you stop using your body, you start losing it. And in a nursing home, where everything is designed to make things easier, it's easy to forget that movement isn't just about convenience, it's about survival. If I'd known how quickly I'd lose my strength, I would have fought harder to keep moving, to stay active, to push myself even when I didn't feel like it. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself this: will you still have the motivation to keep your body strong when everything is set up to make life effortless? Because once you slow down, getting back up isn't as easy as you think. You'll find yourself missing the energy you once had, the ability to move freely, to live on your own terms. Another thing I didn't fully consider before moving in was how much privacy I'd lose. At home, I had my own space, a place where I could close my bedroom door and enjoy some quiet if I wanted. I could do things on my own terms, whether that meant sitting in silence with a cup of tea or taking a long bath without anyone knowing. But in the nursing home, privacy became a luxury I didn't always get to keep. From the moment I arrived, I felt like I was constantly being watched. Staff would come in and out for scheduled room checks, often without much warning. Shared spaces meant I was rarely alone, always surrounded by other residents or staff. Even simple things, like getting dressed or using the bathroom, often required someone's assistance. I know they were just doing their job, trying to keep me safe, but it's not easy to accept help for things you've done independently your entire life. I remember my first week struggling with the idea that I had to ask for permission to do things I'd once done without thinking. Want to take a shower? I'd have to wait until someone was available to help. Need to use the restroom? Sometimes pressing the call button meant waiting longer than I'd like. Even meal choices were limited. If I didn't like what was on the menu that day, there wasn't much I could do about it. Then there was the issue of roommates. Not everyone gets a private room, and sharing a space with someone you didn't choose can be challenging. I was lucky to have a kind roommate, but I heard stories from others who weren't as fortunate. Some had roommates who were loud, keeping them up at night with snoring or talking. Others dealt with roommates who weren't clean, leaving messes that made the small space feel even more cramped. And some had roommates with cognitive issues, making it hard to find peace or even get a good night's sleep. No matter how much you try to make your room feel like home, it's never truly yours. Dignity is a hard thing to lose, and I didn't realize how much of mine I'd have to surrender until I was already there. When people knock but don't always wait for an answer before coming in, when you're spoken to like a patient instead of a person, when your daily routines are dictated by a schedule you didn't create, it changes you. You start feeling less like yourself, more like just another name on a list, another resident to be managed. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself this: are you prepared to give up the privacy and control you've had your entire life? Because once it's gone, it's hard to get back. You'll miss the quiet moments, the ability to close the door and just be, the simple dignity of living on your own terms. Perhaps the most surprising regret I have is realizing how hard it is to leave once you're in a nursing home. When I first moved in, I told myself it was temporary. I thought I'd give it a try, see how things went, and if I didn't like it, I could always go back home. It seemed simple enough, but what I didn't realize was just how difficult it would be to get out once I was in. At first, I thought I could just pack up and leave, if I wasn't happy. But home wasn't the same anymore. My house sat empty while I was away, and maintaining it from a distance became a challenge. My children had already started making changes, selling things they thought I wouldn't need, even talking about renting out the place to help cover costs. When I brought up the idea of returning, they hesitated. "Are you sure you can manage on your own?" they'd ask. "Wouldn't it be safer to stay? We just want what's best for you." I could hear the concern in their voices, but I also felt the weight of their doubt. And then there was the issue of my physical decline. After months of living in a place where I didn't have to cook, clean, or even walk very far, I wasn't as strong as I used to be. The independence I'd once had started slipping away, making the idea of moving back home more daunting than I'd ever imagined. I wasn't as confident in my ability to live alone, and that fear kept me stuck. I met others who had the same experience. They thought they'd try the nursing home for a little while, only to realize that leaving wasn't as easy as they'd hoped. The longer you stay, the harder it becomes to adjust to life outside. Some people even lost the option entirely. Once their home was sold or their savings were drained by the cost of care, there was no going back. That's the part nobody tells you. Moving in feels like a decision you can reverse, but for most people, it isn't. The nursing home slowly becomes your whole world. And before you know it, the outside life you once knew starts feeling like a distant memory. I wish I'd known how permanent this decision could be, how the barriers to leaving, whether financial, physical, or emotional, would keep me tethered to a place I didn't want to be. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself this. Are you prepared for the possibility that once you go in, leaving might not be as simple as you think? Because once you settle in, those barriers can be harder to overcome than you expect. You'll find yourself longing for the home you left behind, the life you once had, but getting it back might be out of reach. Looking back, I don't regret growing older. Aging is a natural part of life, and I've been blessed to live as long as I have. But I do regret believing that a nursing home was my only option. I walked in expecting comfort, safety, and a better quality of life. What I found instead was a world that slowly took away my independence, my privacy, my purpose, and even my sense of self. Does that mean nursing homes are all bad? Not necessarily. Some people genuinely need the level of care they provide, and for them, it might be the right choice. But before you make that decision, think carefully about what you're giving up. Because once you move in, life will never be the same. If I could do it over, I would have fought harder to stay in my own home. I would have explored more ways to get help without giving up my freedom. Maybe a part-time caregiver or a family member checking in more often. I would have made sure I truly needed to be there before making such a permanent move. And if you're facing this decision, I hope you'll take the time to ask yourself this. Is this truly what's best for me? Or is it just what seems easiest right now? Because the life you have today, your routines, your independence, your choices, it's worth holding on to for as long as you can. Don't let go of it lightly. You've built a life over decades, and it's a life worth preserving, a life worth fighting for.